morning. Thanks for coming to our schoolhouse, our very first schoolhouse curriculum meeting. And we really do want to be respectful of your time tonight, so we are starting right at 7 o'clock, and we will get you out by 8:30, I promise. You can go back out in the blustery cold today. But please pray with me as we start. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you so much for the ways that you move, the ways that you work. Lord, we thank you for Aurora Christian School and all the teachers and all the parents and the students that make this place what it is. Thank you so much for the intellect and the minds and the abilities that you've given to us and to our students. And I just ask you to be with us now as we talk about ways that we can capitalize on that, Lord, that we can push these students, we can help them excel and succeed, and just to do their best, and that we can do our best here, Lord, as faculty and staff at Aurora Christian. Thank you for these parents who care so much about their kids and are willing to invest even their evenings to come and find out how they can help their kids. Lord, thanks so much for your blessings. I ask you to just bless all those that are affected on the East Coast right now. Touch them, give them safety and health. In your name, amen.
Amen.
Well, tonight we have a ton to share with you, a lot. We're going to talk about standards and data and testing, all sorts of fun, exciting words, right? And how this is affecting instruction here at ACS. We're going to try to bring it home. You'll hear about the Common Core, and if you don't know what that is, Dr. Beebe will talk about it, but basically they are standards that are used nationwide. They're kind of like a baseline here, the minimum things that every student needs to cover in America. And so we are working on those Common Core items, and those are just minimum requirements, but we need to make sure we hit them all, and then we move past those and do even more. Tonight is just the beginning of a continuous process of review and improvement. We're only about 10 weeks now into our data collection. We're already seeing improvements in planning and instruction. Our principals are going in and seeing what kinds of techniques our teachers are using, and they're already seeing more and more different styles of instruction, which is a great thing. This spring and this summer, we'll be able to analyze all this data that we're talking about and make more informed decisions regarding our curriculum and instruction, everything moving forward. So tonight is basically kind of an informational heads up to give you that groundwork, that framework. Next year at this time, we hope to have another one of these, and we'll actually be able to give you results and just all that analysis, the conclusions and how we're moving forward. And like I said, we do want to respect your time. 8:30, we'll get out of here. So jot down questions that you have. We're going to have a short question and answer time at the very end. And if you have specific questions about your student or one specific class, our principals want to talk with you individually and help you with that issue and help you get that through. But tonight, since we're respecting your time, we'll do general questions, but jot those down. Hopefully we'll answer them as we progress through the presentation. But we don't want you to leave here in a fog, so feel free to ask them. Mrs. Holly Henning, our college guidance coordinator and very invested ACS parent herself, she'll describe our sequence of testing, and she'll explain how to read and interpret those Terra Nova tests that you have. Okay? But first, Dr. Stacy Beebe will provide that framework we need for the intensified curricular push that you're hearing about in and out this year. Dr. Beebe is an ACS parent, so she's also very invested. She's a professor at Judson University. She has a doctorate in instructional and curriculum leadership, and she is helping us with our data collection and analysis. She's providing training to our teachers, and she is supporting our principals as they lead this charge for academic excellence. So you've seen her name a lot, but hopefully you get to hear a lot from her now. So Dr. Stacy Beebe is going to join us.
I'll tell you that Colette's promising to get you out of here at 8:30, but I teach a curriculum development class that takes me a whole semester. So when she asked me to pare this down to 20 minutes, I wasn't quite sure how I was going to do it. But I have notes to keep me on task, so we'll do our best to get you out of here on time. I would like to thank all of you, as Colette did, for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us this evening and further your understanding about the Aurora Christian School's curriculum development process. The report cards that you've received in your packet basically demonstrate some of the excellent things that our students are doing in terms of achievement. However, I want you to understand that the curriculum development process really has to be ongoing and revisited on a yearly basis. And it's for those reasons that we are aligning the Aurora Christian Schools curriculum to the Illinois State Learning Standards and the new Common Core. We are developing a curriculum data collection system that will help us to analyze what we're doing within the curriculum and help us to strategically work on curriculum planning. We are also working on closing gaps and eliminating some of the overlaps in curriculum content and instruction. And we're ensuring that the Aurora Christian School students don't receive just a good education, but the very best Christian education. So let me tell you what my goal is for this evening. It is to address the importance of the curriculum development process that we have put in place and what it will mean for students, for teachers, for parents, and for Aurora Christian Schools as a whole. And I also want to address why and how we are aligning the Aurora Christian School curriculum to the Illinois State Learning Standards and the new Common Core. Now, many of you have probably heard about the new Common Core, particularly if you are individuals who have come from the public school environment, or maybe you have friends and neighbors who have students in the K-12 public schools. And basically, when the federal legislation No Child Left Behind was passed, it forced states to figure out a way to ensure that all students were receiving some baseline educational standards. And so what resulted in that in the state of Illinois were the Illinois Learning Standards. As of recently, though, the standards that Illinois had adopted have now been changed, and they are now adopting what we call the new Common Core in some of the curriculum areas, which would be currently math, English, language arts, reading, and then this year will also be science. The other content areas will continue to use the Illinois State Learning Standards until they create standards for those particular curriculum areas. Basically, the Illinois State Learning Standards are, like Colette mentioned, just baseline. It's what every student should leave school at least knowing. But we want to make sure that our students are achieving well beyond that. The Common Core were developed by an outside national educational agency, and they too are baseline requirements. They just happen to be adopted by a number of states across our nation. So Illinois has kind of joined that charge, and hopefully at some point all of the content areas will have Common Core. It is important to note that as a private Christian school, we are not required or mandated in any way to meet any of these state standards or Common Core. However, the information that is delivered to our students in terms of the Terra Nova test, which Holly will be going over with you a little bit later, is all tied to the Illinois standards and the Common Core. And it's for this reason it is imperative for our curriculum to be aligned with and cover the material and information in order to help our students best demonstrate their knowledge on those standardized tests. Our students also compete for college scholarships with public school students. And again, the tests that they take, like the ACT and the SAT, are also tied to Illinois standards and the new Common Core. Now, let me make it very clear to you, ACS is not simply going to be teaching to the test. In other words, we are ensuring that our students are learning the content identified in the Illinois State Learning Standards and Common Core, but we are also ensuring that our students are learning well beyond the required content and that we are enriching their educational experience through an expanded curriculum. And as I talk about the curriculum development process that we're going through, it will help you to see how it is that we're going about doing that. Now, we also have a Christian component within our curriculum that is not similar to our public school counterparts and is not something that's identified in the Illinois standards or the Common Core. Thus, we are committed to making sure that our students develop a strong Christian foundation and a Christian worldview. Some of you may be worried that if we adopt these, if we align ourselves with the Illinois standards or the new Common Core, that we may be teaching content, for example, in science, that does not align well with our Christian values. Because we are not mandated in any way to follow the state requirements in Common Core, please rest assured that we will be only aligning our curriculum in ways that meet the state standards, but also are only tied to our Christian mission and values. We want our students to have a strong foundation of knowledge, but more importantly, we want them to have a Christian worldview that allows them to use that knowledge to serve and better glorify God. Saying that we are teaching students all the necessary skills is one thing, but we need to have a procedure or a method of proving that what we say we are teaching and students are learning is actually the case. The curriculum data process the administrative team has put in place is designed to tell us what is actually being taught, the strategies being used to teach the concepts to our students, and how teachers are assessing our students' progress. This data, along with the standardized test data, will help the administrative team make strategic and data-driven decisions regarding the school curriculum, teacher effectiveness, as well as student learning. Now, in every curriculum, there are gaps and overlaps in terms of what is being delivered to our students. Gaps simply refer to the things that we think are being taught, but may not actually be in the curriculum. Whereas overlaps are the things that we teach repeatedly from grade level to grade level. Now, sometimes that's necessary in the process of learning, but other times we are teaching things because we think we're the only one teaching it, and then it might be repeated in another grade level. Time is of the essence in education. If students do not move from one grade level to the next with foundational skills, then a teacher has to take valuable time out of their time with those students to reteach those foundational skills before they can move on to grade level content. So we want to make sure that we're eliminating those gaps. The other thing is that if we are over teaching material, then we're also wasting valuable time that teachers could be using to enhance the curriculum in other ways. The data collection system is going to help the administrative team ensure that the gaps are eliminated, the foundational skills are being taught, and that the overlaps, the unnecessary overlaps, are being eliminated. Now, accountability in education is also extremely important. The data collection system is going to help to track when and how often teachers are teaching material that meets the Illinois state standards and Common Core, but it will also tell us when and how often teachers are expanding the curriculum beyond those standards and Common Core. And this will help to ensure our teachers continue to challenge our students and that they're not simply teaching to a test. Research also suggests that students have varying learning styles. Many of you probably recognize your own, but some students are auditory learners, some are visual learners, some are tactile learners, and others are kinesthetic learners. It is important to understand that the administrative team wants to ensure that the teaching strategies that our teachers are using are meeting the needs of these diverse learners that are in our classes. Teaching strategies are simply the methods that teachers use to deliver the instruction to our students. It's important, if we're going to meet the needs of all students, that we differentiate our instruction. And what that means is that teachers teach the same material in different ways so that all students, no matter their learning style, have an opportunity to learn. The data collection system will help us to identify the ways in which teachers are differentiating their instruction on a regular basis. It will also help us to make sure that we compare the student test scores so that we can see the strengths and weaknesses that they have on those tests, and look at then what strategies and assessments were being used in the classroom to help us to identify which ones are working and which ones are not, so that we can make necessary changes. Ultimately, Aurora Christian Schools wants to move our school and our students from great to the best. And this means that we're going to be raising the bar not only for our students, but also for our teachers. I can tell you in working with them thus far, they are excited about the new changes that have been implemented in our curriculum development process. And they can already see the changes that are happening in their own classes. We want our Aurora Christian School students to be highly sought after in terms of college recruitment. I know, at least in this day and age, I want to make sure my child has the best opportunity to scholarship to college because mom and dad just might not be able to pay for it. We also want all of our Aurora Christian School students to not only be prepared to attend college, but to have the skills necessary to be successful in higher education and their future careers. And most importantly, we want our Aurora Christian School families to be confident that the choice you've made in sending your child to Aurora Christian is money well spent. The process that we are using to collect the data involves this. Teachers are electronically submitting their daily lesson plans on RenWeb, and most of you are familiar with that if you're checking your students' grades or homework assignments. What they're doing is they're identifying on RenWeb the lesson objective, and I'm going to show you what that looks like here in a few minutes, the teaching strategies that they are using to teach the material for that objective, and the assessment that they are also using. They are then aligning each of those objectives, tying it to either the Illinois State Learning Standard or the Common Core, depending on which content they teach. The data that the teachers are submitting is then being sorted into reports. And these reports will help the administrative team identify how it is that we are meeting the Illinois State Learning Standards or New Common Core, how we are expanding the curriculum beyond those baseline requirements, and what strategies and assessments are being used so that we can ensure that students are receiving the best instruction possible. The curricular data, along with the student test scores, is then being compared in order to determine, again, those gaps in learning, effective teaching strategies, trends in student achievement, and approaches to improve the curriculum, our teaching instruction and effectiveness, as well as student learning. Now, although the results of our new curriculum data collection system were just 10 weeks into the process, those results aren't going to be immediately available until probably at least the end of this first semester or possibly even the end of the year. But I can tell you that it is already making a difference for our students. The teachers are being more accountable to what it is that they're doing in the classrooms to ensure quality instruction. Now, as parents, you may have noticed some changes to RenWeb in terms of the lesson plan. And basically, when you're looking at RenWeb, you will notice that the first statement in the lesson plan box may look a little bit different. And that's because that is where the teachers are inserting their daily objective. This is what they're expecting students to be able to do at the end of today. Along with that, if you're still looking for homework, it's still in the homework section. I'll go ahead and have you put the RenWeb slide up there and I'll show you. Notice that this is just a sample here, but you can see that under biblical interpretation, it indicates that the students will identify the major literature genre in Scripture, and they will also be able to classify the books of the Bible. So you as a parent can see exactly what it is that the teacher is teaching and what they're expecting the students to be able to do at the end of the lesson. And this is happening also in other areas, like you'll notice down there in English it says that the students will be able to explain how the persuasive methods are utilized in Patrick Henry's speech to the Virginia Revolutionary Convention. So that's what they're learning. So you kind of have a window into what is going on in the classroom for each of the subject areas that are being taught to your student daily. And again, homework is still listed in the homework section. So you may have recognized it being in the lesson plan section before, but it's in the homework section. Now, at this time, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Ms. Holly Henning. She's going to be talking to you about the Terra Nova test and how to read your child or children's scores on the Terra Nova. And then I'm actually going to come back and I'm going to visit further with you about the limitations that are sometimes involved in reading test scores, as well as how we're going to use that test data along with the curriculum data process that we're using to make data-driven and strategic changes to our curriculum moving forward. So Holly, I'll turn it over to you.
I would prefer that, thank you. Okay, as we're working through the process of curriculum review, another resource that we take a close look at are standardized test scores. Standardized test scores provide feedback for us in two ways. The first allows us to have an overview picture of the grade level as a whole, and with that data we can recognize trends in the grade level and in turn identify whether or not there are those gaps in our curriculum that Stacy talked about earlier. The second way is to focus on the student specifically. Now, I always caution students and parents when they're reading their test scores that those test scores, that data, is only as good as the effort that was put into the test on that test day. Whether or not they had a good night's sleep, are they feeling okay, did they get in a fight with their little sister on the way to school, all of that affects the results of that test ultimately. And we as educators are well aware of those outside factors too, and we rely on these scores simply as another tool to help us analyze our progress and the students' progress. We don't believe that the test scores should direct the path that we take with our curriculum, but we do take them into account when making decisions about what's taught.
Turn that mic off.
This one off. Sorry. Better?
Yes.
Okay. In the past year, students at ACS have taken the Stanford Achievement Tests, the SAT reports that you've seen come home. But last year, ACSI made a change to the Terra Nova exams. After researching test options, ACSI felt like Terra Nova provided the features that they were looking for. More current test data and score reporting, varied report options, and then data that's accessible online. Terra Nova also provided the connection to the academic standards that we were looking for, and the publisher of the test is actively making changes to accommodate the new Common Core standards as they become available with each curriculum area. This past spring, our students had the opportunity to take the Terra Novas, and we're very pleased with the new system and the information it's provided. You can see some of the overview results if you look at that elementary middle school report card that was in your packet tonight. Oops. Students in grades 1 through 5 perform significantly higher than their assessed ability level. And the middle school report shows the national percentile for each grade in the areas of reading, language, and math. Take a look at that starred grade 6 score of 88. As a national percentile score, this means that the top 25% of Aurora Christian 6th graders scored higher than 88% of 6th graders that took this exam nationally. So all of those scores need to be read the same way. So for example, in grade 7, the top half of the 7th graders scored better than 65% of 7th graders that took the exam. They're switching on me. Better? Off. Now, while we're looking at the report cards, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and flip it over and take a look at the high school report card, specifically the ACT averages. Now, we looked at these numbers once before at curriculum night at the beginning of the year, but I think it warrants taking another look at this data again tonight. Now, keep in mind that the state average for the ACT is a 20. The national average is a 21. When you look at the ACT scores for our class, last year's graduating class averaged a 24, the class as a whole. The top 50% averaged a 27, the top 20% a 29, and the top 10% of the graduating class of 2012 scored a 30, averaged a 30. Clearly, we are very happy with those results. They're well above the state and national averages, and we're excited about the steps that we're making to ensure that our students continue to achieve extremely competitive scores on their college entrance exams. Now go ahead and shift gears with me and we'll get back to that Terra Nova result, which is the next page in your result packet. Like I said earlier, we take a look at the big picture that the test results provide for us, but we also want to know how each student is growing and gaining new skills. So I want to take just a minute tonight to walk you through the steps of how to read your child's test results so that you can have a better understanding of what the results mean to you in your home. If your child's in an elementary grade level, Terra Nova test results were already sent home, and you may have even brought them with you tonight. For middle school and high school students, your test results are available to be picked up tonight after the meeting right outside. Regardless of your child's grade level, we've provided you with a sample score report in your packet tonight so that you can follow along and as I explain how to interpret the results. The first page that's in your packet and the first screenshot is the individual profile report. This individual profile report lists objectives on the page that are specific to your child's grade level. What's tested for an 11th grader in math is not the same as what's tested in a 2nd grader for math, clearly. So those objectives are specific to the grade level. Then that first column listed there with the student as the heading, This is the score that your child received on this exam in each of the objective areas. So you can see there's a separate score for each one as you go down. The next column over, the national OPI, is the number of items that your child was expected to answer correctly. The moderate mastery range is the range in which a student has some level of understanding. The goal, of course, would be for your child's score to be on the high end or above that moderate mastery range. Then all of that data, all of the numbers, are represented in the graph at the right. The gray bar is the moderate mastery range. The circle is the student's score. And then using the key at the bottom, you can see that if that dot's completely filled in, the student has high mastery. If it's half filled in, it's moderate mastery. And then if it's empty, it's low mastery. So that's the way to read the first page of the score report, which is specific to objectives at each grade level. The second page is the norm referenced scores. This page allows you to see how the student scored in the overall subject areas rather than the individual objectives that were listed on the first page. This report also lists the score, again using that national percentile terminology, represented by the first number in the column. This should be read as saying, for example, in the language composite area, this should be read as saying that this student scored better than 68% of 5th graders that took this language composite test. So you need to associate that phrase with each of these numbers as you read them. It's not a percentage, it's a percentile rank. The national percentile range is given to show that if this student were to take this test again, their score would likely fall in this range. And then again, the number data is represented in the graph to the right, showing that the national average is between a 25 and a 75, which is the thick gray bar down the center. And the student score is the diamond. And the score range is that bar. The third test result page that's in your packet tonight are the in-view scores. Now, students in grades 3, 5, 7, and 10 take this extra exam called the in-view. If your students didn't take this exam this year, then you can expect to see these results this year in the spring when they take it again. This test provides a cognitive skills index. This portion of the exam measures the skills that underlie academic performance. So not computation or vocabulary, it's more the skills that assist and aid understanding. Skills related to memory, perception, reasoning, etc. The results are given in two forms. The first is a national percentile by age, the NPA, and then the national percentile by grade, the NPG. Particularly at the elementary grade levels, a young 3rd grader can often have very different cognitive skills than the third grader he sits next to in class that's almost an entire year older, given their birth dates. So reporting it this way helps to level that playing field a little bit, and you can really see a better comparison of where your child stands compared to the students in their class. Again, these scores should be read by saying that the student scored better than 70% of third graders that took the analogies test with that national percentile title. The graph shows the data for the national percentile by grade. So only one is represented on the graph to the right. Then the overall cognitive skills score is listed at the bottom. It's a CSI is the number that's listed there. 2/3 of students score between an 84 and a 116, sort of the average range, with a mean and average of 100. As you can see overall by the Terra Nova test results, we are excited about this new system and all the data that it gives us. We feel like this is a critical piece in the ongoing process of curriculum development, and we hope that with each year you'll start to see the difference that it's making in your own child's academic performance when it comes to the test results.
Don't be doing that. Okay, now that you know how to read your student or your child's test scores, we'll move on to talking about how this relates to our curriculum development process. Some of you may be asking yourself right now, why do we need a curriculum process at all if standardized test scores really tell us how our students are doing? And that is an excellent question. But it's important to understand that limitations do come with standardized test scores. And so I want to make sure that we clear that up a little bit tonight. First, standardized test scores are good at comparing students to other students in their age range. However, it must be noted that just because a student scores high or low on a standardized test, it does not necessarily give a complete picture of the student's knowledge or learning. It only indicates how well they know the knowledge that was presented on the test. For this reason, we must have in place a curriculum data system that ensures we are teaching beyond that test. In other words, we don't want them just to know what's on the test. We want them to know knowledge well beyond that. Standardized tests are also not an accurate measure of the success or failure of one school compared to another school. Many people look at only average test scores for students in a particular school to determine the academic strength of that school. However, there are many factors that must be taken into consideration in determining how effective a school's curriculum and instruction really are. For example, in the case of public schools, they are required to educate all students no matter their learning ability or need. Where many private schools have admission requirements for student enrollment. And if this is the case, it should not be surprising that a private school average test scores would be higher than that of the public school. However, I want you to note that sometimes in the public school, if the number of students that have special needs is beyond a certain number, then those scores can be pulled out and reported as a subset. And in that case, those scores would not be reported along with their average score for their school. So in this case, it wouldn't be surprising if a public school's scores would be higher than that of a private school, particularly if the private school's test scores include those of their special needs students. In the case of Aurora Christian School, we do have admission standards. However, we accept students with a much broader range of academic needs compared to other private schools in our area. The reason for our broader acceptance is due to our mission in providing a Christian education to all students no matter their academic need. Well, then you might be asking yourself, well, why would we even have academic entrance requirements at all? Well, unlike public schools who receive state and federal funding to provide special education services to their students, ACS is limited in their ability to provide all of those same resources and services to our students. Now, I don't want you to think that we do not provide learning supports or interventions for students who do have special needs. because we do. However, I do want you to understand that we do a disservice to families and to you if we admit students and then we cannot provide them with the services and interventions that they need in order to be successful. I mention these things because the only true comparison that can be made between schools regarding success or failure has to be made between schools that have similar populations. It is great when we can say that our students are academically outperforming other schools. However, this comparison is not enough. We have to be able to compare our student test data with classroom data in order to ensure we're doing all we can to help our students be successful. It's also important to note that sometimes a high score or a low score in a particular group of students can positively or negatively skew that data. If we look only at the average for a class, it is easy to inaccurately blame a teacher for poor class performance or to inaccurately give credit to a teacher for exceptional class success. However, one student's high or low performance may be skewing the data in a positive or negative direction that may be very inaccurate. If our administrative team is going to make accurate decisions regarding curricular changes, teacher placements, and in-service training, then we have to be able to look at the data sources, a multitude of data sources, to determine the cause of class success and failure. Percentiles are also, as Holly mentioned, different than percentages. Percentages compare a student's ability based on how well they met the criteria of a particular exam. Most of you remember that from taking tests in school. If you got 8 out of 10, you got an 80%. But percentiles only tell us how well we did in comparison to someone who took the same exam. And I think Holly mentioned earlier that when you look at those standardized tests, that when somebody scores a 70 in the 75th percentile, it means they did they did better than 75% of the people in their age range, and only 25% of individuals in their age range did better than they did. One of the things that you need to keep in mind is that falling within the normal range in terms of percentiles is between the 25th and the 75th percentile. That's a fairly broad range to say that that's normal. But we have to have a curriculum data collection system in place that will help us to continue to strive for excellence, even though our students might be performing well beyond the 70th or 75th percentile in terms of their standardized test scores. All right, so in conclusion, I really just want to reiterate some key points that were made this evening. Number one, I want you to understand that there is a comprehensive curricular data collection system in place that will be driving curricular changes at Aurora Christian Schools. Aurora Christian School will not, and I want to repeat that, we will not simply be teaching to these standardized tests. We want to make sure that our students are learning the material that's required to do well on the standardized tests, but more importantly, we will ensure that our student learning expands well beyond the Illinois state standards and the new Common Core. And then lastly, Aurora Christian Schools is committed to ensuring that your students, your children, receive the highest quality Christian education that we can possibly give them. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Ms. House.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.